Now, with all that said, I want to focus on how this culture is going to spread, okay? And that is what when we talk about the spread of culture or the spread of anything, we're looking at diffusion. And there are two kinds of diffusion we're going to talk about, but don't get confused because yes, there are four, but basically you've got things that are going to move with the movement of people. So literally, the only way something can move through relocation is if human beings move themselves and take it with them. Okay, that's what we mean by relocation diffusion. And then the other kind here is expansion diffusion. Something is going to be strong at a center point, a hearth or a node, and it's going to expand outward and continue to be strong in the center point, but also be strong in places where it goes. And so expansion is the trait is diffused from its geographic hearth or center, node, whatever you want to say, and literally spreads or expands contagiously, hierarchically, or by being changed and adapted. So the different kinds of expansion diffusion we're going to talk about is contagious, hierarchical, and stimulus. I'm going to give you examples of all three. So we're just looking at folk culture. The Amish is a really good example of folk culture. I wish I had more time to talk more about the Amish culture with you, but we're really kind of scratching the surface here, and it's already been a good 48 minutes. But the Amish, no one wakes up in the morning saying, hey, I want to be Amish today. I want to go out and find an Amish community and join them. We wake up in the morning and think, well, I got to go to school, or maybe when I grow up, I want to be a doctor or a teacher or whatever it might be. But we don't grow up or I guess dream about being Amish one day. There's a reason for that, because it's a folk cultural group. And in order to be a part of that group, you have to kind of be born into it and culturally a part of it. That said, when their culture spreads, it's not because people just decided they're going to be Amish. It's because the Amish people have moved from one place to another within the country. Traditionally, this area around Pennsylvania in general, this Great Lakes area, kind of along here, Pennsylvania, Ohio, we got Amish have moved down into parts of Kentucky, parts of Tennessee, a little bit in North Carolina, but you got Amish people moving further west and further south in the direction of these arrows that I've shown you. The reason is because honestly, the Amish populations are tending to grow in numbers. I was just reading something the other day about how the Amish tend to have maybe somewhere around 4, 5, or 6 kids. Well, you guys just got out of Unit 2. You learned a little bit about how that's not normal in the United States mainstream. We are right now at replacement. We're having about 2 kids per family, and our population is not growing due to natural increase. But the Amish populations are growing due to natural increase if they're having 5, 6, 7 kids. All right. So when a kid in the Amish community grows up and gets to be 18 years old, it's customary that they get given land and a house that they can have their own. And the community will get together and build them one, and they build it all together. And you can see on YouTube videos of Amish people building barns and houses and things like this because they really do a good job at taking care of themselves within the community. But if there's no land because there's a million gajillion people living in areas that are traditionally Amish, they're going to move further out where the populations are more sparse and land is more available and cheaper. So therefore, their culture is spreading across the United States via relocation diffusion. Other examples of relocation diffusion. The Witness is a good movie example of folk Amish culture. Yeah, you know what? I've seen, that's the one with Harrison Ford, right? Yeah, I hadn't seen that in a long, long time. It's also rated R, so make sure you guys watch it with your parents, unless you're 18 years old. Jokes. But yeah, it's been forever, but I do remember it being a pretty decent movie. I don't remember looking at it in the context of Amish culture, but there are so many different documentaries and things on YouTube. I'm a big YouTube guy, so I mean, I spend a huge amount of time on there, and there's a lot of good stuff about the Amish. And in a weird kind of roundabout way, haven't we kind of made Amish culture into popular culture? What do y'all think about that? For a group of people who want to live in isolation and kind of think of it, of cameras as taboo, There sure are a lot of pictures of them, a lot of documentaries showing them. We've got TV shows about people breaking Amish, about people who might decide they don't want to be Amish. So in a lot of ways, we have kind of commodified the Amish culture as a whole. And that's part of the struggle between this local diversity and globalization we were just talking about. It's a challenge for them. They've got a big challenge ahead of them in trying to preserve their way of life in the face of a globalizing world. Spanish and English to the Americas in the 1500s, that would be an example of relocation diffusion. Catholic Christianity to South America would be an example of relocation diffusion. By the way, there are more Catholics today in South America than there are in Europe, by a landslide even. Soccer in many parts of the world initially would have been an example of relocation diffusion. However, soccer has recently, I guess in the 1800s, about the time of the British Empire, would have been more of a hierarchical diffusion. It would have been because soccer would start in big cities where a lot of people were, where a lot of British were, and eventually would have been adopted by locals in places where these populations would mingle. Then it would move to other parts of the world as well. So that would be examples of hierarchical diffusion. And today, many sports also move through contagious, which is kind of getting us into expansion diffusion. So contagious, hierarchical, and stimulus diffusion, they are all different examples of when something is strong at the center and then expands in every single case. So you don't have to see the relocation of people in order for something to expand through expansion diffusion. And that means contagious, hierarchical, or stimulus. That's the reason why I wanted to make that distinction there. So contagious diffusion would be like Christianity during the, maybe today, or like Mormons or Jehovah's Witness. I don't know if you guys have a lot of people that come and knock on your door and hand out Bibles and pamphlets and things like this, trying to convert you to their faith. But those are classic examples of contagious diffusion. When something is, they talk to you, they bring you into their faith, and then next thing you know, you convert and you talk to others and bring them into your faith. Pokemon Go, that was cool for a day. My brother still plays that. Do y'all know that? That's cool. I didn't know that until he told me the other day, and I was like, wow, okay. Well, gotta catch them all, right? So Pokemon Go is contagious diffusion. Yeah. Bottle flip challenge, any kind of social media, any kind of a viral video. These are things that they don't pick favorites. They don't go to people who are rich or people who are young or people who are old. Anyone can be a part of these cultural, I guess, of these traits, and anyone is able to spread them in turn. So it doesn't pick favorites. That's contagious diffusion. Just like if you sneeze on somebody's face, you get them sick. It doesn't matter who they are or where they come from. They're susceptible to your germs in the same way contagious diffusion is going to spread like that as human beings come into contact with other human beings. You got this kid over here doing a dab. Maybe I'm not so good at that. Yeah, my students pick on me a lot. Hierarchical is like a lot of times. I mean, it isn't like contagious. It's like contagious in that it's expansion diffusion. But what you're looking at here is just like you might have a hierarchy from maybe a king to nobility to lords to regular everyday people. In the same way, a cultural trait that diffuses through hierarchical diffusion is going to diffuse from a place of extreme importance, like maybe New York City, to smaller cities like Atlanta, and then to smaller cities like Columbia or Raleigh, and then finally to the boondocks, like where I might live, or where some other rural area. But it's going to go first to places where a lot of people are, and then kind of jump. It's not going to contagiously spread. It's going to jump from one city to another. A really good example of this is most of our popular culture. Music. Taylor Swift doesn't come to Aiken, South Carolina to sing a concert. All right. She doesn't go to the Midwest somewhere like in South Dakota where there's nobody there but maybe 100 people. She goes to where she's going to sell out the auditorium. She's going to go to Columbia or to Atlanta or to Charlotte or to New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. All right. These are all places where these singers are going to go. And as they go on tour, they're bringing their their product, their culture with them, and that's going to diffuse, hierarchically in the same way. Anybody ever heard of the Broadway show Hamilton? I'm not much of a Broadway guy, and I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's fantastic. It is a rap-based musical Broadway show about Alexander Hamilton, and it's definitely a classic case of hierarchical diffusion. Started in New York, was there, sold out all the time, and then has gone to other smaller cities where it continues to sell out. And I just saw whenever I was in Greenville in my state not too long ago, it was being shown there at one of their opera houses, which is Greenville is a big city, but it's not nearly as big as like Atlanta. And American football. Notice here I've got the London games scheduled. Did you guys know that American football is played multiple games in the NFL? Every single season is played in London at a soccer stadium, the Wembley Stadium. Wow. Who'd ever thunk? But in fact, that is going on. And so that's an example of hierarchical diffusion, because the football players aren't living in London. These are like the Seahawks, the Raiders, the Tennessee Titans, the Los Angeles Chargers. Our players are taking football to London. From London, football might go to other smaller cities within the United Kingdom, and maybe even at some point to other countries in the European Union. Another example historically is the early Christian communities. You guys have heard of the book of Corinthians in the Bible, or the book of Ephesus, or all these different epistles that were written by the Apostle Paul. They're named after the various cities where he started churches. And from those cities, Christianity began to spread contagiously. So notice that Christianity is the one example we've mentioned that is relocation, hierarchical, and contagious diffusion all at the same time. So one thing can spread in various different forms. That's important y'all understand that. It's all about the way it spreads. Another example of hierarchical diffusion, and I understand that we're an hour in. I have no problem keeping on going if you guys are with me. So as long as y'all are with me, I'm going to keep on going. We should be done in the next 10 minutes for sure. But cell phones are something that first appealed to, or first were in areas where there was a lot of people in large cities, in places where the wealthy had access, in places that are only in MDCs, initially the United States. Today, people in rural areas, people all over the world have access to cellular technology. And increasingly, more and more people in more rural areas, and even poor countries, are getting access to cellular technology. Reverse hierarchical diffusion would be the opposite of hierarchical. Rather than something come from New York City or from Washington, D.C., it's going to come maybe from some rural town, in some small population state, and be diffused up. Examples of this might be slang words, or might be the idea of tattoos, or anything like this might get picked up by middle class or by upper class, and then diffused throughout those populations after it was started by someone maybe of lower status, or maybe in more poverty-stricken regions. Or I guess LDCs is what I meant to say. Stimulus diffusion, this is the last one I wanted to talk with you about. And it's probably the most complicated form of expansion diffusion, because a lot of times it's hard to think of examples. So I've taken care of that for you. But stimulus diffusion occurs when the underlying concept of a really good idea takes hold, but the idea itself does not. Now, I've given you some examples. The first example I gave you is the graphical user interface, GUI. It started with Apple before Apple was cool. So the Apple computer didn't take off, but the idea of the graphical user interface, which is being able to click with your mouse on icons in order to use applications rather than having to type in codes, which was based on the DOS operating system, you were able to, Apple started that. But IBM, which kind of cornered the market on computers, is the one that went with it and made the idea take off. It's a classic example of stimulus diffusion. Other examples are fast food. Big Mac, Whopper, the original chicken sandwich. They don't all have to be hamburgers. These are signature sandwich or flagship sandwiches that are similar to each other, but unique to that individual fast food restaurant. The idea of a flagship sandwich took off, and the restaurants made it their own. Another example having to do with fast food is the drive-through concept. I don't know if y'all have Chick-fil-A where you are, but I know, man, where I'm at, Chick-fil-A, that drive-through is going to stretch out to the road. You can put a Chick-fil-A on both sides of the street, and you're going to have a daggum line going all the way down to the road. But they've gotten slick about it. Rather than doing like what McDonald's has done with the the ordering kiosks, you can go through 2 lines to order your food and then go to 2 windows to get your food. What Chick-fil-A has done is they actually station workers. It's their pleasure to stay out there and take your order in the hot sun or in the cold rain or whatever it might be. They're going to be out there taking your order because, man, you got to get your Chick-fil-A. I hope you guys have Chick-fil-A where you're at so y'all understand what I'm talking about. But they've changed the drive-through to meet their needs. They didn't invent the drive-through, or they didn't do something completely different. They've taken an underlying concept. Yeah, Chick-fil-A, man. No kidding. I love it. And it's a good place to bring your kids, and it's always their pleasure. You know, they're so happy to serve me. So that's what they've done. They've taken the drive-through and they've made it kind of their own thing.